Welcome back to Coffee Talk, the place where real conversations happen and you always leave feeling a little more connected. I'm your host, Kate Coffee Bacon, and for this episode, I get to do one of my favorite things, and that is to put a dear friend in the guest seat. Jenn Rinfret and I met 3 years ago through the Microsoft channel, and this conversation has been a long time coming. Jenn has lived a lot of different lives. A runway model in Milan at 17, a single mom rebuilding from scratch, survivor of a serious car accident, and the founder of a business that helps seniors navigate technology with dignity. Through all of it, Jenn has consistently led with empathy and with kindness. In this episode, we get into what empathy really looks like in leadership and in life, the difference between a gamble and a calculated risk, and what the seniors she worked with taught her about slowing down and paying attention to the people that are right in front of you. This one is going to stay with you. So let's get into it. Jenn, welcome to Coffee Talk. I am so glad you're here.
Well, thank you.
If you could, for the listeners that might not know who you are, quickly introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Jenn Rinfret. I am currently working with Seer 365 in the Microsoft channel. I'm the commercial lead for Americas, and I live in Montreal, Canada.
Before we dive into your story, your dad had a saying that I've thought about since one of our first conversations. Can you share it?
Whenever I would ask my dad, "How are you today, Dad?" my dad would always come back and say, "Jenn, I woke up on the right side of the grass. It's a fantastic day."
I love that. And knowing a little bit more about your story, I know that he said that through all seasons and trials of his life and different things that he was going through. And I think you first told me that about a year ago. And knowing the things that he was going through at the time, that really resonated in a very big way with me. And I thought, if there is another human that's going through the kinds of things that he is, that wakes up with that positivity and that outlook on life, so can I. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's rewind and go back, because I think where you started tells us a lot about where you are now. You started modeling at 14. That's, I'm sure, no surprise to anyone. And then at 17, you were in Milan. What was that like for you as a teenager?
A couple different things: terrifying, exciting, and fascinating. I mean, it's not every day that some young teenager gets to see that industry behind the scenes, but absolutely terrifying. It was, I think I told you the story, how my parents were away on South Africa on a business trip for a month, and I went in to see my agent. And a lady had flown over from Milano, another agency. It's very typical. They'll go and visit and then pluck models and bring them to different areas in the world. And she met me and wanted to take me home that day. And I'm like, well, can't really do that. And so from there, I packed up my stuff. I got a hold of my parents in South Africa. And to this day, I still can't believe, being a mother myself, that they actually allowed me to do this.
Right.
I packed up my stuff and flew to Milano.
Yeah.
And from there, that was a real game-changing moment. I really learned some skills that I have taken with me throughout my whole entire life. And it really was an incredible foundation, for sure.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you were thinking and going through? I mean, you were 17 years old. We've talked about this before, and my jaw hits the floor every time I hear that, because at 17 years old, I'm just trying to figure out like what I'm going to wear to school the next day and what I want to be when I grow up, right? Like, I'm not trying to navigate a new city, a career, different personalities, expectations of what other people may think you want to be. And at 17, with such a, the life experience meter is low there. What was that like for you?
Terrifying. I'm not going to lie. It was absolutely terrifying. But it taught me that and a common theme for me throughout my life is, when you are pushed out of your comfort zone, really amazing things can begin to happen. And for me, when I landed, they gave me an address. They picked me up. gave me an address and said, in the morning, you need to be at the agency. Here's the address. I'm like, okay. So I get my map out, and this was pre-Google Maps.
Right.
So
Right.
I've got my map, and Milano's not the grid kind of city that we're used to. So I made it there, and I thought, okay, whew, got that done. And then they proceeded to give me a list of about 8 locations I needed to visit that day. And they're called go-sees. So you have your portfolio, and you go and visit all the different photographers and magazines and companies. And they, look at your portfolio and see, you're essentially interviewing for jobs. And so I quickly learned, at the beginning, I wasn't good with the subway system or the trolleys. So I was taking taxis, and I quickly learned, sit in the back with a map, because otherwise you're going to get a tour of the city. And the one thing that really resonated with me was, they're rejecting you. I can take rejection really well. I'm not scared anymore of someone saying, no, you can't do that, or we don't want that. Because I think you can probably imagine at 17, they are rejecting you for a job because of the way you look. And you can't, right? And I can't change that. Like, that is the ultimate rejection. And at 17. So now, like, if I'm selling, I'm like, well, if you don't want it, so like, I'm not the product. So
Right.
makes it a little easier. So it gave me a lot of confidence, and it helped me, separate from that. But it was a very, very competitive market. The girls are very competitive. You can be going for jobs and there's 200 people going for the same one. It has its seedy side. So you have to navigate that as well. So in all reality, I got a hard knocks lesson on street smarts.
At a very early age.
At a very young age. I had to learn very quickly. Yes.
Listen, if we are ever on a trip somewhere and there's somewhere to navigate, you are in charge of navigation, because I can't get from my house to the grocery store without some issues.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm actually really not a good navigator.
Great. Blind leading the blind.
Exactly. I wouldn't trust me, but it's all good. Yes.
Okay, so then obviously you've transitioned out
Mm-hmm.
of modeling. Tell us about that. What happened with that transition and what was next for you?
Well, at the age of 21, I was exhausted. I've lived a whole fast-paced life. I mean, it was a very fast-paced life. So I went back home. I moved out west to Western Canada and got married, had a daughter. So I took the very traditional route. And then from there, I ended up getting divorced and had to retool myself. So that was a very challenging time of my life. I was in the process. I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I was waitressing during the day. And then at night, I thought, I'm going to get into this technology thing. Seems to be where it's at.
Right.
So I literally was sitting at home teaching myself how to use a computer. I could literally build my own computer. I really dug in deep, didn't get a lot of sleep, but very, very much self-taught, all in technology. I did have a brother who was also in the technology and the sales side. At that time, I think I was working for HP on to Microsoft. But I was on a road path that I wanted to be a graphic design artist. And unfortunately, during that time, I got into a very, very bad car accident, which I ended up wearing a neck brace for 4 years. Had a lot of rehabilitation. And coming out of that, being a graphic design artist and sitting at a computer all day was just not in the cards anymore. And I also really, my daughter was at such a wonderful age and so engaged in her sports and everything. I needed to have flexibility to be able to not lose out on those years. I wanted a balance, but I also needed to be more self-employed and in control, because I was still transitioning from having all of these injuries, which I still struggle with today. So I ended up during that time, because I had acquired all this computer knowledge, my parents started pinging me and saying, hey, how do you do this on the computer? And, I can't make this happen. So I started helping them. And then their friends started calling me and asking, hey, can you help me with this? So that led me to believe, I think there's a business here. I looked at going to university for an entrepreneurship program. But in the curriculum, it was create your own business as an example test. And then, you kind of carry that through the program. And I thought, well, you know what? I needed the money as well. So I said, I'm just going to do the business myself and rely on really reaching out and building a network with other women entrepreneurs. I had a great support system, other business leaders, mentorship. I'm not a classroom girl. I never have been. Way too hyper. I want to be in there, and I like the practicality. I didn't like the theory so much. So I ended up creating a business called Computer Tutor for Seniors. And from there, I would at nighttime create all the lessons to help them. And then during the day, I would spend time with them and going into their home and helping them with their technology so they could stay connected and be safe about it, and to really allow them to age in dignity and not be lost, because things were so shifting. If you think about all the things that we do, whether we pay bills or anything, it's all online. It was moving, the companies and businesses were moving so quickly to that, but they were missing out on the fact that not everyone was adapting the technology as much as they were wanting to implement it. So that's where I came from.
So I want to push pause for a second, because I really feel like, as we look back on our timelines, right, we've lived it. So we know these big moments that happen. And like, Jenn, we're not talking about tiny pivots. We're talking about major life changes and choices that you are going through up until this point. And all of these changes, I want to recognize that you're doing it with so much resilience, with so much determination, with grit. And anyone that knows you, whether just casually knows you or calls you a friend, knows how kind you are. So I'm going to get emotional. I want to take a second and say, through all the things that you have been through, you've not let time or circumstance change the kindness in you or the heart of you. And I want to show appreciation for that, because you have been through a lot. So like I said, sometimes on our timeline, like, we know our story, but when you start telling other people your story, like, there's so much there to sit with and digest. I mean, you started about, 17 years old in this career that is tough. You said it. It's cutthroat. It's competitive. You left that for a marriage that ended, to taking charge of your life and taking care of your daughter, to a tragic accident that you still suffer from now. But all of it, you just keep going with so much grace and so much resilience, and learning a new skill so that you can continue on. And in the end, giving back so much. You're helping other people come along with technology changes. So I just wanted to give a breath of air in your story and say, wow, you truly are inspirational. And if not, there's so much that's inspirational there, but in the kindness that has stayed with you, and you haven't let anything that's happened tarnish that. So
thank you.
Anyway, my friend, I just wanted to say it. Okay, so you are in a senior tutoring business now that was born out of friends asking for help. I love that so much, because you didn't set out to build a business. Like I said, you set out to help people. And that distinction matters so much to you, I know. Tell me more about those early clients.
That time in my life was such a beautiful time. There was challenges, I was a single mom. I was building a business. I ended up growing that business, because as I was doing it, others wanted to do what I was doing. So I ended up building out a franchise. I went through and did the whole 2 rounds of investments, built out an application. So it was grit and hard work. And being an entrepreneur, when they say it's a roller coaster, let me tell you, it really is. And you wear multiple hats. But I like controlled chaos. I think that I thrive in that. When it's not, when it's calm, I get a little freaked out. And I think there's something wrong. I'm like, this is a little too relaxed.
Way too normal right now. Something is about to happen.
Something's going to happen. So I think, working with seniors was such a pleasure. And I I really hope that, if anything, the listeners will walk away and look at seniors differently. I think we are so fast paced in our lives that we get angry that they're slow drivers or they're taking too long or they can't figure something out at the cash register. And we all need to take a breath and a breather, because you know what? We're all going to be that age. And they have so much history. They are a wealth of information. They are such incredible storybooks. And you don't know their stories unless you actually interact and you work closely with them. So during my time, I worked with a lady who was an ex MI6. So if you think about it, the seniors that I was helping, a lot of them had immigrated from England and from Europe. So they really experienced the war. So there was a whole other aspect, learning about them living in bomb shelters, spies. There was one gentleman that was a prisoner with Russians and had spent one night, he had to lie on top of a bunch of prisoners that were not alive. We're talking about very tragic situations that puts life in perspective. If, they didn't make your coffee correctly, well, you know what? That's not a bad first world problem to have. So they taught me so much, in that you have to enjoy every moment and you have to live your life, right? That's where, for me, empathy really comes into play. To lead with empathy, that is very, very important to me, because what it taught me, and I came across a lot of seniors, that there was one lady in particular who, the person who referred me to her, no one in that store wanted to deal with her. They said that, she was so incredibly difficult. We don't like her. So I said, okay, well, I'll go and see her. And, everybody has a story. So when you see someone and perhaps they're not rosy posy and they're not particularly friendly and they're a bit prickly, there might be a reason why, whether they're having a bad day, whether they're struggling, whether they're feeling insecure. I'm dealing with, at that time, seniors who were very overwhelmed, very skeptical of technology. They were frightened. And so it turns out she was a lovely lady. I had so much fun with her. And she was just very nervous. She also was dealing with a husband who was struggling at home, who was terminally ill. She had a son that lived overseas, so she was very much on her own. And so, we look at people and just automatically just brush them off. But it really taught me that you really need to take a look at who you're speaking with, who you're with, and understand that they're a human, just like you. They have issues just like you. Can't tell me that you don't have issues or backgrounds or baggage or triggers. And it's just very important that we treat each other with respect and with empathy, because that's where beautiful relationships and beautiful things happen. So,
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree with you more. You were talking about the value in these stories of older people. My in-laws are now in a beautiful retirement facility, and every single time I talk to my father-in-law, he has some, and I'll say the word outrageous because these stories are just incredible.
mhm,
Story of one of his neighbors. So these are
mhm.
people that are living together and living community together and sharing their stories and strengthening each other. And there's so much power in community and knowing stories. So I actually want to go and have tea with him twice a week so that I can just hear some of the stories of his neighbors and people that have kind of gone before, because there's so much wealth and experience, and you can ask those crazy questions too, like, I'm in this situation in my career, in my, in my parenthood or whatever. What did you do? What was your experience? And there's a whole lifeline to draw from there.
I think that people, whether you're going into a retirement home or, I like to, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm in Microsoft conferences, I'm really keen to just get to know the person first. I really just want to genuinely know who the person is. I think we need to also take time. We have incredible people in our lives. We were getting my dad to start writing out memoirs. and getting him to talk and recording him. There's so many wonderful tools out there now, technology wise. It's incredible. And what blew me away was just even my dad's story and growing up in England. And yes, he lived in a bomb shelter. His after school activities was literally picking up shrapnel and off the streets. And they would have a contest in the morning as to who brought the most shrapnel, and they would win a prize. So getting to understand all those stories and then going through their professional life, we're so stuck in getting to a place that we don't take the time to actually sit where we should be. And that's in the now, and really taking the time, because before you know it, it's gone. Right.
Yeah.
So I just think that we have a great opportunity to just ensure that we learn from our elders and that we really do live in the now and take the time. My dad always would say this to me, and especially near the end of his life. He said, Jen, it doesn't matter what you have at the end of the day. It's all about friends and family, and it's all about the journey. You got to have a good ride. You get one ride and just enjoy the ride. It's about the journey. It's not about what you have. It's not about what you end up with at the end. And to me, that really, really sticks with me. And I think about that every single day because I think it's very, very powerful. And it's a very powerful reminder for us all in just this fast-paced world that we live in. And we're always going and going. That we have to remember that.
Yeah. Looking at you, right, you've had a lot of chapters that most people don't know about you. Thank you for sharing those on Coffee Talk. There's so much to be learned from you and from your story. Through all of that, what kept you going?
I'm stubborn. I'll admit that. I think, I have a lot of drive, and I know that it all works out in the end. It'll always get better. So yeah, I think for me, what keeps me going is knowing that we have one shot at this and we got to make the most of it. I think, I have come across some really tough times, scraping two pennies together, complete pain and agony. I think going through recovery from my car accident taught me, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but always, it's going to get better. It's not going to be like this forever. I think that if you really want something if you really want something out of life, you got to really work hard for it. Work hard, play hard. I do play hard. I'll admit that. But I think that if everything is given to you or everything is easy, you don't really appreciate those wins. And for me, you had asked me earlier in an earlier conversation, if someone could have told you something back in 25 that you could know now, having known back then, which we know now. And my answer would be, aside from if they knew what the winning lottery numbers were.
That makes things so much easier.
Right? I actually don't want to know, because I think that although I can look up and look back on certain parts of my life and go, oh, that was a really difficult time. But without that time, I wouldn't be who I am today, right? We learn from all of our mistakes. We learn and grow through all of that. I don't want to change any of that. So, what keeps me going is the fact that, wow, like, how lucky are we? I'm healthy. I'm living in a beautiful part of the world. There's so many people out there far worse off than me, and I just want to make the best of it. Yeah. Life is way too short, honestly.
It really is. If I had some piece of wisdom to impart on 25-year-old Kate, it just would be that everything's going to be okay. That truly,
right?
you're
It all
going to
works
be
out.
okay. It all works out.
Exactly.
It's, great, and then it's awful, and then it's great again, and then it's awful, and it all just works out, and you live and you learn, and you just keep going. That's such an oversimplification, but it's so true, and it does all just work out.
But you say it's an oversimplification, but if you look at all of the different, I live by a handful of sayings. They're very simple, but they're so incredibly powerful. Treat people how you would like to be treated. Be careful how, you treat people on the way up. You never know when you might meet them on the way down. There's just those simple, don't judge a book by its cover. All of those. The simplicity is very powerful.
You've done a good bit of mentoring, like true mentoring. You
Mhm.
told me about the Women's Leadership Circle, golf charity for kids and technology. How did you come into those roles of mentors?
So the Forum of Women Entrepreneurs that I spent several years as a mentor, as well as connected with a university of British Columbia to help that incubation program. That really transpired because when I started and I was growing out my franchise, it allowed for me to tap into that network. They were wonderful to me, and it's all about paying forward. And so as I got more on my feet, I realized, hey, you know what? I can help these people. So I would sign up and be a mentor to an entrepreneur, a young woman who is starting a business, and I'd spend the year with them to help them and just have monthly calls. And again, just working through what are your key problems that challenges that you're faced with, and let's work out what it would look like to be able to change that and work through it for the next month, and then, keep building on that knowledge. So I was there as exactly what I had received, which was super powerful. I also would go on panels where it's like speed dating, but speed entrepreneur challenges. And so they'll come up and they'll tell you, I have this challenge. And so you kind of have to on the seat of your pants kind of talk through, well, have you thought of this, or and ask them different questions to get them to think about things in a different light. So a lot of mentoring. I did a lot of mentoring over several years, and for me that was very important. I think that we need to be able to support one another, and it's not take. We need to give back. We need to give more than we take, for sure.
So I want to ask you a couple of questions that I think our listeners are going to want to hear you answer, because I know your answer is going to be very real.
Okay.
You've built teams, you have grown companies, you've worked across in multiple spaces, tech services. What separates people who adapt from the ones who don't?
People who adapt have longevity in their careers, but they also, so when people adapt, right, there's a whole uncomfortable feeling around that, right? Because you're having to go out of your comfort zone to adapt to something new. And again, when you take that risk, but it's a calculated risk, but when you take that risk, you are opening yourself up to something new that you would never have had an opportunity, and you never know where that's going to lead you to. So for people who don't like to adapt and want to stay with the status quo, my heart goes out to them. And I hope that they can find the strength to be able to give themselves a little push. Or if you see someone in your circle that needs a little nudge, it's really important, because I feel that they're missing out. They're really missing out on the potential of themselves and all of the potential doors that they're going to open. But adaptability is very, very important, especially in the world that we live in now and the space that we're working in right now. My gosh, if you're not adapting, good luck.
My conversation with Kevin Armstrong last week was all around this completely. And if you're listening and haven't tuned into that episode, please do. Kevin gives some real world things that you can be doing right now to kind of turn on that adaptability switch, and some ways that you can ignite that in yourself. So absolutely, you have to adapt and evolve and move forward to stay relevant, especially right now. I mean, it is every day I wake up to change. You've used the word empathy. I think that empathy is a word that gets thrown around a lot in leadership circles right now. What does it actually look like in practice? Like on a Tuesday afternoon when things are really hard, what does empathy look like?
I think, empathy, I guess for me, it's grounded in me and everything and how I approach things. And don't get me wrong, I get pissed off sometimes and frustrated. But I think, in real world situations, if you're coming up and say you're working with a challenging person, and maybe they're not adapting as the way you wish, or they're not seeing, the resistance to change or being open to other ideas. My first inclination is to Try and figure out why. No, we don't spend enough time on the why. And is there something else that I don't know about them? Plus, also, it goes back to adaptability. And I learned this a lot because I taught hundreds of different seniors. When you walk into their home, it's like you're a chameleon because you're trying to get them to adapt to the technology. So you kind of adapt to the way they learn, they adapt to their personalities. You really do related to as you are a chameleon. And I think when it comes to empathy, it's the same. You need to be able to take a step back and try and understand why are they acting that way. And we're too quick to say, no, I want it this way. We're too quick to, hey, I want you to do this, or I want you to buy this, or it doesn't work that way. We're all human. We need to build relationships. Business is relationships. Bottom line. I agree. I hear the term, oh, you have to lead with empathy, but they don't show it at all. There's a difference. And that to me is very frustrating. I get discouraged when I see that because I think that even when, you'll laugh, but when we're at a conference and I'll see, someone maybe seems a little disgruntled or someone's not liking that person and they're frustrated. You think, oh, well, you know what? Don't be like that. Just be kind because you know what? They have kids, they have a family, they're a human outside of work as well. And I think we forget about all of that. I think there's not enough kindness in the world.
Well, you lead that charge, my friend. You really do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think like going back to our stories and understanding who we really are, away from our name tag. Away from that badge. We are people. We leave our creature comforts to step into this work world and do the things we do. Yeah. So understanding those stories.
I think another way I would answer it as well is that when you really get down to who a person is, what makes them tick, and that is where you can then help them get to where they need to be. And you can't do that any other way but taking the time and showing empathy to understand where they're at and who they are.
You talked about working with seniors and how society in general undervalues their wisdom. Talk a little bit more about that. Why do you think that is? And what did they teach you?
I think because we live in a world where it's all about youth and staying young and not getting old. And we are in such a we don't slow down ourselves. So it's, we've got to acquire this, we've got to do this. And I think that we disregard and look at seniors that, they don't know anything. We're living in a world of technology and the evolution, right? So we're very much surrounded by all of that. And so when we look at a senior, either see, what do they know? They're back in the Stone Ages. They don't have anything to give back, or they're a complete inconvenience because they're too slow, at the till, or they're driving too slow, or where we need to go back. Before, we used to really spend a lot more time with our elders. I mean, they used to age with us in place. Now we've kind of all gone and moved to different areas around the country or the world per se, where that wasn't really the case hundreds of years ago. So things have shifted. But I think that we tend to in society are just so caught up in the race that we forget to take a pause, look around. And I feel that we're really missing the boat on not tapping into seniors. History repeats itself, and they have just fascinating lives that we can learn from and that they can share. It's a whole pool of phenomenal information and learnings that are often overlooked. And it breaks my heart because they've given so much to society and they deserve that respect and to feel, maintain their dignity as they get older, for sure. It's very, very passionate about that. It's something that I get very upset if I see that disrespect or disregard. It probably hurts me more than, the average person just because of my background. But I just would, sometimes just want to shake people and say, look around, have that conversation. When you're out and about and you're sitting waiting and there's a senior there, a lot of the time they're very lonely. They may not have very many, their circle might not be, they might not be on that retirement home, the cruise ship on land. They might actually be living on their own. And I think that we need to be able to stop. I challenge your listeners to make an effort the next time that they see a senior to actually go up and say hello or make a comment, like nice shirt or how are you doing today? You have no idea the impact that it has on them for the rest of their day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have talked about so much. We've talked about, there's so much to unpack here from your resilience in your own personal and professional journey. You have reinvented yourself multiple times. You've done it all with so much kindness, as I said, and so much empathy. We've talked about slowing down, paying attention. We've talked about being adaptable. We've talked about getting out of your comfort zone and doing something different and doing something new. You just gave us a challenge that might be outside of our comfort zone to start a conversation with someone that may be sitting on their own. I think the next time I go into a coffee shop, if there is a senior sitting there by themselves, I'm going to plop my little self down and start a conversation. And when I do, I'll tell you that I did it. So you could hold me to it.
There may be some introvert seniors out there now that are going to be all mad, like, oh, why are these people coming up to me now?
You're like, same, girl, same. This is uncomfortable for me. But you know what? That's a great question. You talked about getting out of your comfort zone and the uncomfortability that comes with that. And that is part of adaptability and changing a little bit, maybe that 1% change, getting out of your own way to make a difference and make a change. And that practically boots on the ground can be what that looks like. Jenn, I just want to say something to you as I wrap us up. I think your dad would be really proud of you. The way you carry his philosophy, the way you live it, the way you share it, the way you show up for people, that is a ripple effect in action. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing so much of your story today. If someone's listening and wants to find you, where can we find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the easiest way for them to find me, I would say. Yeah.
To everyone that is listening right now, I hope you heard yourself in some part of Jenn's story today. That's the whole point of Coffee Talk. We're all figuring it out, and we do it better when we do it together. If this episode meant something to you, share it with someone who needs it. That's how we build community, one conversation at a time. I'm Kate Coffee Bacon, and this has been Coffee Talk. Go do something brave this week. See you next time. Thank you for joining us today on Coffee Talk. A special thanks to my guests for sharing their story and to you, the listener, for being a part of this conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a Monday morning chat. Until next time, I'm Kate Coffee Bacon, and this has been Coffee Talk.